Hello, it's Larry Clark. We're doing another Meet the Composer session, and today we have composer Tyler Arcari along with band director Joshua Wine. Hi, Joshua. How you doing?
Doing great.
Great. Well, it's your time to say hear what you want to get out of Tyler and ask all the questions you've been wanting to know. So here you go.
Sure. Well, it's good to see you, Tyler. Tyler and I already know each other because we went to school together at Troy University and marched in the band together. And so every time Tyler and I get together, it's all about catching up and kind of talking about what each other's up to. But I polled some of our students just to kind of see some things that they might, I said if you got to interview a composer of band music right now or just a composer in general, what kind of things would you want to ask? And I guess the first one that would probably be good to get us started with this video would be, Tyler, can you give us kind of a short version of your story? How did you end up where you are right now?
Yeah, man. Well, first, thanks for doing this. It's always fun to see you. Go Troy.
Yeah.
I was lucky in high school. There was a gentleman who was a little bit older than me who had graduated. He was at the local community college. His name was David Samuel. And he would come around, and he was a very good friend of another one of my friends. And she kind of hooked me up with him and said, this guy writes music. And so I started talking with David, and we kind of became friendly and friends. And at one point I asked him, how would I start writing? And he showed me a program called Finale, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. That's a notation software. And he would listen to and look at all the music that I try and write. And I would literally when I started, I would just plug things into a computer. I'd play stuff on my euphonium and then try and write it down, get it into the computer and hit play and see if it sounded good. And he would come over and basically look at it and give me pointers. And one of the biggest compliments he ever said to me, and the piece was awful. I mean, absolutely nothing to it. I would look at it now and chuckle at what I did. But he told me, you created some drama. You created a moment, a point. He said, you did something that's the like, aha, and that stuck with me. And it was an encouraging moment. And so I kept writing, and it became a hobby. I finished high school, decided I wanted to be a band director. So I went to Troy Music Education, and I was also lucky to have people like Ralph Ford and Robert W. Smith and Rob Grice down the hallway. And so when I was brave enough, I gave them music to look at, and especially Ralph Ford. He was the one who would sit in the office and just bleed red pen all over my music and say, come back when it's better. And then I did that until I got brave enough to put it in front of a pep band, which you probably were in at some point. Basketball pep band played an arrangement that I did. They all hated it, which is a good thing because you don't learn until you get something in front of people. So I remember that first one they all hated. It got better later, but the first one was a great learning experience. I got to hear what it sounded like, and I said, well, can't do that again. So then I got more opportunities to write for ensembles on campus and the marching band every once in a while and the symphony band. And then Ralph Ford told me one day when I was close to graduating, I needed to send music off to publishers. So I asked a bunch of the people in the symphony band. I think I paid them in drinks and pizza, because that's what I could afford at the time. And I got them all together to record some grade ones. I think 3 or 4 grade ones. They recorded it. I put it all in nice scores, MP3 file into a manila envelope, made like 10 copies of it, and then started a months long journey of submitting it to a publisher, either hearing back or not hearing back, and then submitting to a publisher. And I didn't hear back from almost anyone at all, just nothing. And then Ralph Ford told me, send it to Larry Clark. So I sent it to Larry Clark. He sent back a huge rejection letter. It rejected everything I sent. I sent the beginning tunes plus other stuff, rejected it all, but he sent this huge email, and the email had nothing but comments on, this is why we won't take it. And that was the first response I got back from any publisher. And I took that and I I went home and I got real upset and downtrodden. I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to go be a band director. Maybe I wasn't a good writer. Maybe I wasn't working on the skills that were needed. But I got mad that weekend, and I took one of the tunes that he suggested suggestions for, and I fixed it and I sent it back to him, kind of like as a, I'll show you, you know. And he responds back with an email, great, send more. And he took it. And you know, the lesson there was the publishers wanted to see that you would work with them and be able to take criticism and edits. And I did, and that was a good step. So, you know, I'm very thankful for that. Then I was a teacher, and then I had the opportunity to become an editor at this publishing company because of my relationship already composing with for Larry Clark. So that's my story.
Cool. Well, I want to touch on two things that you said there that I think are really special. One is I completely agree with you. We had a unique experience at a small school in Southeast Alabama in that, I mean, Ralph Ford was my Theory 1 professor, and Rob Grice was my orchestration and arranging teacher. And all of us who came through that program had this experience with very hands-on teachers who were not afraid to mentor young writers. The other thing I wanted to point out is what you said about playing. I do remember playing your music in basketball band. I don't happen to remember us like completely rejecting one. I trust you when you say that.
I'm write you a love song. It was a Sarah Bareilles. It was the first thing I ever put in front of them.
Gotcha. But what was unique about that was we had groups like that, and they would let student arrangers and composers try stuff out. And you know, sometimes it went really well, and sometimes it did not. But it was never this attitude of, you know, this didn't go well, never write anything for us ever again. It was, let's try this, and if something doesn't work, we can give each other feedback on, like, you know. And I remember we would read things, and then there'd be comments, and you'd hear a mellophone player go, yeah, that's just not going to work on the mellophone. Or you'd hear a saxophone player go, you know, that doesn't lay down on the horn well, you know, or something like that. And I think that was a unique thing that, you know, Troy was really open to that. And it wasn't just the basketball band. We had students writing for the marching band and writing all sorts of stuff. And I think it's one of those things that made our experience there really, really unique. Another question that I had from a student is just kind of talking about what composers inspire and influence you the most right now.
It's always a hard one. Lots. I get to work with 59 composers at the company, and I learn something from them every year when we go through the music. I also learn from everybody that submits music that we have to review, and I learn from people who are currently writing. I think one of the best things about music is that no matter the culture, the distance, the time period, there's always a sharing kind of melting pot of ideas that we all learn. And it's not necessarily that we're looking to those other forms to grow. It's that we experience this music, and then we get these musical sensibilities as a result. And it's kind of a magical thing, which is, yeah, you got to express music is magic. We honestly bang on things and make sound and get emotion from it. It's pretty cool. So, but I will name some because there are some that have been very influential to me, and it's not necessarily their music, but it's their personality and what they do. Of course, Larry Clark gave me my start in the publishing world. So I have I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for him. I also learned from him by being edited. And I think that's important. I hope as an editor, I'm also helping to teach composers my own perspective, which may or may not be better than theirs, and it may or may not be helpful to them, but I hope. Ralph Ford was instrumental in giving me a thick skin to take edits. You can't go through the publishing world, at least, and not be edited. Everybody gets edited. So Ralph Ford was instrumental. Julie Giroux, for some reason, and I love Julie to death, I drove her around in a car for like a week during SEUS, which is a camp that Troy has with clinicians. It's an honor band. It's great. But I drove her around for a week, and we talked about video games because she was playing Skyrim at the time, and she had just started working on Rift and Wed. And she's a great influence, not only in the world, if you watch her on Facebook, but she's been very, very supportive of me, my music, and just me. And I think that's real special. It's nice when other composers, because, you know, at the end of the day, if we're all trying to write music that people are playing and buying, essentially we are technically competing against each other.
Sure.
Right? So you would think that it's cold and it's distant with, you know, composers, and it's not. It's loving, just like the band family and the music world and orchestra and choral. It's just, I don't know, it's a family. Outside of people who I actually have met, I'm influenced by melody, people who focus on writing melody, like John Williams.
Sure.
I mean, I know that's the cliche cop-out answer, right?
He writes great melodies.
Yeah, of course he does. And not only that, but he hammers them.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you leave a John Williams anything and go, I don't know what the melody was?
You can sing it when you leave.
Yeah, and it's important when I am working on music for students, because they have to have something to latch onto in order to teach a story or concept or something like that. And melody is a strong fundamental to do that with. It's a good teaching tool.
Awesome. Well, that's some great answers. Absolutely. Really, really good. So another one. This is my question. My question is, you mentioned in your backstory that before you were an editor and even before you were a full-time composer, you were a band director. So how did the experience of you being a band director influence the way you write today?
I was actually having a conversation with another one of our composers about this, who was talking about how writing music for younger students is more challenging because you have constraints.
Sure.
You know, ranges, rhythms, stuff like that. And I agree, up until a point where you start to think of it like, if I'm a middle school director and I'm picking music for my students, I'm looking at music objectively like that to go, yeah, I'm already doing that. What range can they handle? What rhythms can my group handle? What type of sonority and 2D sound and harmony can my group handle? And what can I put in front of them to help them get better? That isn't just going to be a roadblock immediately. You know, you want somewhat of a stepwise progression to aural skills and stuff like that for kids, so that they can grasp higher concepts and more advanced melodies and harmonies and rhythms. So I think teaching helps you kind of simplify your goals as a writer. My goals when I started was to write music that was not only fun for me, but impressive sounding. And impressive sounding when you're younger is fast and loud and challenging.
Lots of notes.
And as you get older, impressive to me is sophistication as it gets simpler. You know, what's the difference between a 4-note tune here and a 4-note tune here? There's still just 4 notes, but, you know, can you portray a concept, a story, a feeling, an emotion, an impact? You know, I mean, so I think being a teacher helped me get that across, because not only did I have to try and still write melodies that they would be able to digest, but I also had to try and create something that would be inspirational for them at the same time with those constraints. Sure. And being a teacher let me know what they could do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I've noticed as I transferred from being a high school musician into being a college musician and then being a teacher, is when I was in high school, I thought hard band music is loud, fast, lots of notes. And when I got to college, I realized hard music is long phrases and tuning complex chords and, you know, creating drama and creating emotion. Like, that's way harder to do. Because when you're playing a piece that's 1,000 miles an hour, a mistake lasts that long. I mean, it's gone. You're not gonna notice it in the grand scheme of things. But if you're playing something and it's 60 beats per minute, that mistake lasts for a long time. And so, yeah, I think that's really smart. I think a lot of composers, band composers, are starting to wise up to this too. That writing for young band is it can be more lucrative because a lot more band directors would be willing to buy that. But man, you're putting constraints on yourself, because if you're writing a grade 0.5 or grade 1, it's like first 6-7 notes of the B flat scale, and there's your color palette.
Yep.
But it's been amazing to me as a middle school band director to see what people can do with that. I'm not a composer, but I would I buy pieces for my groups to play, and it's the stuff for very young band, second year players. That's the stuff that really impresses me the most. Is like, wow, they really got a whole lot out of a very limited color palette, and it's just, I think it's just attributed to y'all's creativity and what you're able to do. I don't want to ask you the cliche like, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, can I piggyback off that a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
So I think, and you put a very good point about the color palette that you can get with a grade 1 ensemble. It's remarkable how much that then translates into making your harder music, your more challenging music, more interesting and more colorful, because you've kind of created a whole new restraint and color palette in a younger grade level that you can then expand and use. It's like, a mentor of mine has always said, Bach did a lot with 4 notes. You make an ensemble sound huge with 4 notes, as long as it's scored right. And so you don't need a lot to make something sound good. And the less you work with, I think the easier it is to then push that out to something more expansive. So, sorry to butt in, but
I think that makes total sense. I teach middle school, but I also get to work with marching groups, and I'm a big marching arts fan and stuff like that. Loved being a marching band in high school and in college. But it's so funny to me. I watch drum corps every summer, and every impact moment's still a B flat major chord. It's still a big B flat, and these groups. I mean, it's unbelievable what horn lines can do. But when they want a big impactful moment, it is still a 4-note B flat chord. Like, it's still just, it's there, and because they know that it works. And do they sometimes do more colorful chords? Absolutely. But man, when they want to push somebody back in their chair, it's still the B flat chord they learned in the 6th grade. Like, it's still the same thing. So, I'm not going to ask you like, well, I kind of am, but I'm gonna qualify it. But the question you get at honor bands, I know, is what's your process? How do you go about writing a piece of music? But I thought it was interesting. One of our students, when I asked them this, they specifically wanted to know about, like, where do you, when you're starting, what are a couple of different ways that you have found inspiration for a piece? Like, just, I'm coming up with the idea at the very beginning and kind of fleshing that out at the very start.
So I answer this at honor bands or anywhere, and the answer is kind of complicated. It changes all the time. It
Sure.
changes as I get older. It changes for the piece. It changes for the time of day, and there's nothing fancy about that answer. It's just what works. For me, there's no muse. There's no magical mystery tour floating around that just pops into my head and I lose myself for hours and just hammer it. That's not how that works. There's a craft to writing music, just like there's a craft to painting. There's a craft to any type of skill. And so after you practice that craft, you have starting points that make it easier. And so it depends. Sometimes I'll start with a fragment of an idea that popped in my head very briefly, or that I consciously come up with, and then I can sit and manipulate that. And I piddle around with that for a little bit and see if I think I can put it somewhere else. Sometimes I hear something somebody else did chord progression wise, and I think that's just so nice. And then I play with that until I manipulate that into something that I like, or because sometimes, you'll hear a chord progression and you'll go, that's great, but what if it went here? What if it did this? What if we went over here? And what could I do on top of that? There are pieces that I've written that are either commissions that have a deadline, and that's a great starting point. For real, you got 2 weeks to do this. Oh, okay, I better get something. And there are other times where I can push out a piece real quick and it's easy because the material is, it's not something that I get lost in thought. And then sometimes it takes me weeks. I'll have to put something away and go listen to something else and get it out of my head, go throw on the radio or something. So it's not glamorous. And I think that's a wonderfully mystery breaking answer that you don't hear from a lot of composers. It's not glamorous. I woke up and I go sit down at the computer, maybe, with a t-shirt and shorts on and eating some Cheetos and, drinking, it's not glamorous.
Yeah.
So.
I think most kids at honor bands, there's this mystique around composers. First of all, they're blown away when they find out there's one that's alive. And then once they do find out there's one that's alive, they're like, okay, so were you sitting somewhere reading a book and then suddenly there was a eureka moment and you had this and those of us who have been around composers and also have had friends in school that compose, you'll know that it's random and it's sporadic and inspiration comes from very unique places. I think that the same can be said about teaching. I think that, there are some days where I'm like, I'm fulfilling my calling and I'm going to school. And then there are other mornings where I'm like, man, I gotta teach jazz at 7:20 in the morning, and I'm excited about that, and it's better than any cup of coffee that I can do. But I think that one of the best things that we can do as teachers is to be honest with our kids and to be transparent and to be like, look, guys, today's a slow morning for me, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we try to be. When we try to fulfill all these expectations and they forget that band directors are people and composers are people and, we have lives like everybody else. But here's another question that I had from a student. They asked, they know that you being a current band composer has lots of music that's not only being performed by bands, but also to honor bands, and you get to go either conduct or, consult or be a clinician or whatever. So far, what has been your favorite piece of your own to clinic at an honor band or conduct?
So again, with some candid honesty here, I do not like conducting my music. I try my best to not even program my music if I'm invited to be a clinician, because it's terrifying. It's terrifying I have this weird tunnel, I call it tunnel vision, but it's ear tunnel or something. I just had a piece performed at like the Midwest Clinic, and that was supposed to be super exciting for me, right? Because it's cool. It's kind of like a small
big deal
park when you start. It's awesome, and I had never thought I would have a piece played at a venue like that publicly, And I'm sitting there going, this is going to be great. And the second they start playing, it's like just a wind tunnel. And I'm sitting there just introspectively freaking out. And it doesn't matter when I hear at a recording session, it doesn't matter. It's so hard to hear my own music because I hear it in my head and it never sounds right. So to premise that, I think the most fun piece, an enjoyable piece I've ever had to rehearse was a recent one I did because it was not really in my wheelhouse. It was a march. Oh. I wrote a piece called Capstone, which was a traditional like Fillmore march, and it was about a grade 2, and it was fun to teach it because I was able to, as a former band director, teach concepts that I wanted to teach in marches when I would teach with a Carl King march or a Fillmore march or Bennett march or something like that. I was able to do it with my music, and I was able to kind of focus on that instead of the fact that, why'd I write that there, or that doesn't sound good in the trumpets, or what was I thinking? I was able to actually be a teacher in that moment. And that's not something I get with most of my music. And that's more me, but.
That sounds great. That's exactly what I was looking for. I remember you telling me that you were not a fan of rehearsing your own music, but I loved your answer to that when we talked last about this. And so I thought I'd ask you again. But yeah, that's interesting. And I know that there's pressure there when you're a composer and you're asked to be a clinician, or maybe you're the guest composer and everybody's programming something by you, and it kind of just I know that other as a composer you probably miss just working on other people's music, like being in the classroom, and so that's something that's always been interesting to me.
But I do it and I tough it out, and you won't be able to tell while I'm working, but inside I'm screaming, you know. So no, but I totally do, and I make sure not to just program me. I do the bare minimum of me. I'll do maybe 2 pieces of mine, and then I try and program other people. Not only that, because as much as I appreciate that they want to play my music, it's not healthy from a band director standpoint. It is not healthy to just program the same stuff over and over, or the same people over and over. It's not healthy for your ears or your musicianship. It's just, so I try and still do that even when I'm on stage, you know.
Cool. All right, so this one's a little bit more specific. I don't want to go forever, but one of the things that I think that I've seen that's been the most exciting to come out of Excelsior in the last several months, and I know you guys have been working on it for a long time, is your chamber music series, your flex duets and your flex trios and stuff. Back in January at our state music ed conference, I bought a whole set for my band because solo and ensemble's big at my school. The kids really enjoy it. But I am one of those band directors where I'll get a kid walk up and I need a trio for oboe, tenor sax, and treble clef baritone, and I'm like, what? so when you guys come out with these books, and Excelsior's not the first one to do flex duets and flex trios, but the quality of these books and the quality of the stuff in them, it's really great. So can you just talk about other than it being a business decision, like we should do some chamber music stuff, what was the inspiration there as far as how you guys approach that with the flex duets and trios?
Well, first, thank you very much for believing enough in the music to purchase it. That means the world. I hope it gets used, and that's even better. That book series is kind of unique because it's a cool evolution, because the original kind of and the original book series is kind of based on things that have already been done in the industry. So the flex series, like you were saying. But what we wanted to do was take that another step further and provide some instruments that kind of get left behind, like oboe and individual tenor sax books, versus having the tenor sax sort of read the clarinet book and it sort of not work. And, you know,
sure,
it'd be close. You know how it is. When I was a director, I'd pull out the warm-up book, and the tenor sax book would be the trumpet book, and the tenor saxes would complain. So we did that. And then someone in the industry made a comment and said, what about percussion? And we kind of went, that's kind of hard to figure out. What about percussion? So we tried it, and I think suddenly it turns into this huge possibility of awesome collaboration for chamber winds that you don't have right now, which is that you can use them as duets or trios or small ensembles with percussion or just duets with percussion. It's a cool expansion and evolution of that idea of flexible ensembles. And what you said earlier about your students coming in and asking, I have a friend that plays oboe. That's why, because I had the same thing. I had a bunch of duet series in my filing cabinet. I had a filing cabinet with all kinds of solo and ensemble stuff in it. And I had, you know, first festival solos and stuff like that. And it was great. But I always had kids that had friends that played some, you know, weird combination. And it seemed like that's still a need in the band rooms across America, especially when, by and large, it looks like programs on average are losing students, or they're having to make concessions for AP classes. So maybe the student doesn't get a band class anymore, but, well, you know, we can totally put them with somebody else that has an instrument that's similar and play a duet. Or in my case, I was not the best clarinet player as a band director. So if I had a clarinet player that needed help, or I wanted to do some lessons, I would take a duet book that I could play flex, and I would pick up a trumpet or a trombone or whatever I was comfortable on. And then I would be able to emulate good, proper musicianship, as I should have been able to do at that level, you know, with my instrument, so that they can hear it, even if I wasn't as proficient with that. So hopefully it's a multifaceted tool that's directed by what we think is a need in the industry, and not necessarily as a business standpoint. And yes, of course, we love to sell them.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, it's a business. We, you know, and as a composer, I like to sell music too. But at the same time, that the kind of start of those series is because of need.
Awesome. Well, I think they're great teaching tools. I'm glad you mentioned the percussion thing because I'll run across percussionists every year who want to do chamber music, but maybe don't want to do it with their other percussion buddies. They want to play with their friend who plays trumpet, or they want to do it with their friend who plays clarinet. And there is not a whole lot out there for that. Like I said, there are books that have come out before that are, mix and match kind of ensembles. But you're right, percussion a lot of times out things like oboe. Speaking as somebody who has clarinets in my jazz band, and sometimes they have to read tenor sax parts, I completely understand what you're talking about because they might be in the same key, but things are not translatable that way.
It's not idiomatic.
Right. The clarinets are like, these are really high notes. And I'm like, well, it's because you're playing tenor saxophone. No, they've been going well so far until we ran into our current issue where now I've turned into an online band director. I had all my chamber music kind of set out on a table. And, I mean, your books were getting some high traffic usage. So it was pretty great. So
have you ever thought about, I'm going to go on a tangent for a second. Have you ever thought about using it as ensemble practice to then split up into chamber practice? So for instance, if you have a group of students who have never played in the chamber group, a good way to kind of get them used to it. I don't know if you did this with solo and ensemble. When solo and ensemble kind of has 2D exercises, you can have the whole band play.
Yeah.
So the idea behind percussion was also to have the entire ensemble be able to play the exercises. And then after you play the exercises, you can split them up into any combination that you want. And suddenly now they have the confidence because they know how it's supposed to go. Yep. And there's nothing different. Now you're just playing with a smaller group.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. I mean, high school band directors do this a lot, but middle school, it's kind of, we're fighting a confidence battle because middle school is, not the highest in confidence level. But as college, post-college musicians, we know, I got much better as a trumpet player by playing in chamber ensembles. Playing in band was great, but it wasn't until I sat in a brass quintet and it was me. And if I didn't play my part, nobody was going to play the part. That really, when that kind of responsibility is ramped up, you see a lot of, I guess you see a lot of improvement, but you also see just ownership, and the kids can really build their confidence, and they can go, I handled this part pretty well. And so, yeah, man, I can't speak for all middle school band directors, but I appreciate it for sure.
They also start listening, which is important for translating to your ensemble.
Absolutely. So as I kind of wrap some things up here, I think this would be a kind of a good place for us to kind of round things down. But one of the last questions is I guess tell us a little bit about Tyler Arcari, the non-composition based aspect of your life. What are some things you like to do just as a person that have nothing to do with music?
Well, currently, it's a little hard to do some of that stuff, but I very much enjoy just walking around stores.
Yeah.
Almost every weekend or throughout the week during the week, I get the family and we go to just to browse stuff, just to be out and about. We also like to go see live alligators out in the middle of a place called the B-Bar Reserve, which was an old ranch that was turned into this reserve for, it's just a big swamp now, and there's huge alligators out there. So we go out there and hike and look at alligators. I've got 2 bunny rabbits, a cat, and we are animal people, so we've got that going. If I didn't think he would cause a ruckus, I'd have had the door open and the cat would be in and out because he likes to sit right here on my lap when I'm playing something. I also play video games, which is another reason why I think I related so much to Julie Giroux, because not only was she a phenomenal composer, but she was down to earth and played video games. And I had not met a composer yet who did that other than people my age. So I play video games. I also used to build computers, which was fun. So I guess the big answer for you is, outside of being a composer, I'm a nerd.
There you
go. Proud nerd.
Everybody's nerdy about something. And yeah, absolutely. I think that's been awesome. Just as we've seen a lot of younger band composers getting their start, students are starting. And I think this happens with every generation. Students get excited about composers when they realize that they actually have a lot in common with those people. When we've played pieces by you in the middle school band, there have been moments, either if I've conducted your piece at an honor band or conducted my own band on your stuff, the kids will say stuff like, "This sounds really cinematic," or "This sounds like a video game," and I'm like, "Well, it just so happens that this composer does play video games." And I know that I've said that about Julie's music as well, and some other younger composers, because that's a big part of our background. Is generation previous, film music was a big driving force. They had film music in their wheelhouse, and our generation, we were the first generation to have fully scored video game soundtracks, and so that's which is a totally different beast than even a film score. So I think that's as more of that music starts to become available, I think kids are really making connections with that and realizing like there's a whole lot of ways that maybe I could compose music later on, and so that's.
Well, another thing I found doing honor bands is that you have a very short amount of time to reach students. So you have to get in there and you have to be inspiring. The music you pick has to be inspiring. And I've found that if you can get a personal connection with a composer, it makes it even better. And so, for instance, I'll dial up David Samuel. I'm just going to pick the ones I did last time. I dialed up Carol Britton Chambers and David Samuel and put them on speakerphone. Mm-hmm. And man, I'll tell you, suddenly then the kids just eat into that music. Not that they weren't enjoying it beforehand, but it's almost when the composer says, "Do me proud," for the phone, it's almost okay. Musicians, kids who are in music, choral, orchestra, band, whatever, they are all some of the best kids in the world. Absolutely. And they are all gung-ho. And that kind of encouragement just pushes them, and it's great. So if I am playing music and programming music other than me that's by living composers, I will do my best to call them if they're open to it and let the kids kind of understand that they're alive. Or another thing I do is make sure that they look at the back. I have an example here. So we've started doing this, which I think is cool, but on the back of the scores, you get pictures of the composers. And then on the inside, you get social media.
Absolutely.
Professional social media, stuff that kids could go follow.
Sure.
And I encourage them at the honor band to go do that. I said, find one of the pieces that you like, go on Facebook, find their page, get a look at them, search them online, and see if you can find something interesting. And I think it's important that kids see living composers and composers that look like them.
It's exactly what I was fixing to say. I think that, and that's one of the things that I really think Excelsior has done a great job at. Is I want to program music that my kids can relate to. They can look at those composers and say, that person looks like me. I mean, that could be me. And so I think that all the publishing companies are really making a concerted effort to try to represent the students that we're serving. But I think Excelsior is doing a great job, not only by the composers that they associate with, but by doing things like this, so that students can see like, oh, that's just a regular person. Their job happens to be that they write the music I play in band class, and so I think that's a huge thing. People talk about kind of the state of art music today, and like classical music's going away, and I'm like, I think that the paradigm's just shifting a little bit. I think that people are just trying to find something to relate to, and I'm not saying that we should throw the old masters out. I think that's really important. I think symphony orchestras have a place. I think that what they program is important, and they should program the great masters of what we do. But I think that the orchestras that are going to, and bands that are really going to last the test of time, and they're really going to engage with their audiences, are the ones who go, let's make a connection with somebody who's still walking around. Let's make a connection with somebody who's breathing new life into music and doing something new today. Especially with something, I mentioned jazz earlier. I teach my jazz band, and I think one of the biggest things that blows their mind every year is when I teach them just at the very beginning, like day one, that this is not an art form that did exist at one point and doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. And that's the way it's treated a lot. And I'm like, people are still writing jazz in 2020, and I think that, I think, and you and I we're both in the very small world of band directors, and band directors are very opinionated people.
Oh yeah.
And I love Holston Granger as much as the next guy. I really do. But I also, acknowledge the fact that, if you're just on that train and you don't appreciate what's happening literally every week, especially in this last year where so many college ensembles have been live streaming their concerts, like the amazing amount of new music that's coming. I think band is really the place for new music. Honestly, I think, and I think there's some famous Francis Macbeth quote about that. Like, I think Hindemith told him, he's like, the orchestra doesn't want you, the band wants you because you're new, But I know there's really great stuff coming out for orchestra and really great stuff coming out for band and really great stuff coming out for jazz ensemble. And I think it's really exciting time to be a music educator. In my opinion, everything that seems to come out and is fresh and new, it just provides more ways to make connections with kids. And I think stuff like this is like the best way to do that. And if we're going to have to be distance learning, we might as well be doing something that is really going to make us better musicians. So
yeah, man. And unlike people who aren't around anymore, where you can only learn from their music, you have the opportunity to talk with people. And I've never met a composer who's alive that I've been able to ask that doesn't like to do stuff like this, doesn't like to meet people who appreciate their music. Because there were lots of composers back in the day who never knew that their music would be appreciated because it really wasn't. Starving artist idea is the same for gigging musicians as it was for writers and authors and stuff like that. It stinks to only be appreciated for your stuff after you're dead.
Yeah.
So, they all love it. I again, encourage students to reach out to composers and writers and authors and clinicians. I mean, even if I go to an honor band and there's another clinician, I say, reach out to that person. Especially if you didn't have me and you had that. I said, just because they're not going to do what you are planning on doing with your life, reach out to them and inform them of how much you were impacted by their teaching that week, because it's important. It's important for people to feel like they're appreciated. And I think I agree with you. As a composer first, I am very proud of what Excelsius is doing, and I'm glad that we are always trying to do it better.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are on the right track, and I'm looking forward to seeing you got some great folks on the roster, and so I'm excited every time I see these new things come out, and I've been listening to some of the new music that you guys just got recorded, and it seems really, really exciting. So, Mr. Clark, thank you for allowing me to be here.
Oh, thank you for doing this for us, Josh. And Tyler, thank you as well. And hopefully your students and students around the country are going to get something out of this.
Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely. Y'all have a great afternoon.
Take care. You too. Bye-bye.